On Christmas morning, I was standing in my kitchen, holding a warm cup of coffee and looking out at the frost on my backyard grass. The clock on the wall showed 7:15. I had already loaded my old station wagon with wrapped gifts for my 6-year-old granddaughter, Lucy. I was wearing my favorite flannel shirt, the one my wife Eleanor gave me for our 30th anniversary, just a year before she passed away. My phone buzzed on the counter. I picked it up, expecting a Merry Christmas call or a picture of Lucy waking up to see what Santa left under the tree. Instead, I saw a text message from my daughter Chloe. The message read, "We've decided we're going to distance ourselves from you. Please don't look for us anymore." It was long, cold, and formal. I read it twice, and as I did, I could practically hear the voice of my son-in-law, Donald, behind every single word. Donald was a man who loved big words and control. Chloe had never spoken to me like that in her entire life. She was my only child, and though we had grown distant since she married Donald 5 years ago, she had never been cruel. I knew she had just clicked send on a message Donald had typed out for her. I sat down at the kitchen table. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. At 65 years old, after working as a bookkeeper for 35 years, I had learned that reacting in anger never solves a problem. I looked at the screen, took a slow breath, and typed a reply. "No problem. I'm going to cancel the automatic payments for your house and car, and I'll let you know when it's completed. Press send." Then I turned off the phone, set it face down on the table, and took a sip of my coffee. If you are listening from somewhere far away, please drop your city in the comments so I can see where this story has traveled. And please, stay with me until the end, because the choice my daughter and her husband made that morning was about to trigger a chain of events that none of us could have predicted. To understand why they sent that message, you have to understand how Donald and Chloe lived. They resided in a beautiful, sprawling house in a wealthy suburb of Riverside, California. The house was worth about $850,000. Donald drove a brand new luxury SUV, and Chloe stayed home to raise Lucy. To anyone looking from the outside, they were a successful, high-earning young couple. But the truth was very different. Donald was a sales representative who spent more than he earned, trying to keep up appearances. 3 years ago, when they were on the verge of losing their home, Eleanor and I had stepped in. We set up automatic monthly payments of $4,500 for their mortgage and $2,200 for Donald's car loan. We did it because we loved Chloe, and we wanted Lucy to have a stable home. But after Eleanor passed away 14 months ago, Donald's attitude changed. He began to look at me not as a benefactor, but as an embarrassment. I was just a retired old man who lived in a modest 2-bedroom house, drove a 10-year-old car, and wore faded clothes. To Donald, I was a social liability. He didn't want his wealthy friends to see me. The last time I visited their house, about a month ago for Lucy's 6th birthday, Donald had pulled me aside in the hallway. He told me that my presence was making his colleagues uncomfortable and suggested that I limit my visits to holidays. Chloe had stood nearby, looking at the floor, saying nothing. I realized then that Donald had convinced her that I was a burden, a needy old man who had nothing left to offer them. They believed my late wife's pension and my small Social Security check were the only things keeping me afloat. They thought that by cutting me off, they were shedding an old, dusty piece of baggage. They assumed I would beg, that I would cry, that I would offer them more money just to let me see my granddaughter. They had no idea who I actually was, or what Eleanor had done before she died. I finished my coffee and walked into the study. I sat at my late wife's desk, which still smelled faintly of her lavender perfume. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out a heavy black metal box. Eleanor had handed me the key to this box 3 weeks before she passed away in the hospital. She had looked at me with those tired, loving eyes and said, "Walter, you have always been the gentle one. You let people think you're simple because you don't care about showing off. But Donald is a greedy man, and he will try to push you out when I'm gone. When he does, open this box. Everything you need is inside." I took the key from the chain around my neck and opened the lock. Inside, there was a thick stack of folders, deeds, bank statements, and a letter addressed to me in Eleanor's neat, elegant handwriting. I opened the letter first. "My dearest Walter," the letter began. "If you are reading this, it means Donald has finally shown his true colors. I am so sorry I cannot be there to stand by your side, but I have made sure you will never be weak. You know that my grandfather left me a small inheritance when we married in 1983. You always insisted we leave it alone and live on your salary, which we did, but I didn't just let it sit. Over the last 30 years, with the help of our old friend and attorney Julian Mercer, I invested that money in real estate and stocks. Everything is in your name, Walter. The house you live in, the accounts, the investments, all of it. I never told Chloe the full extent of our wealth, because I wanted her to build a life of her own, and later because I saw how Donald controlled her. Under Section A of this box, you will find the deeds to 17 rental properties in Riverside. They are all paid in full and managed by a local property services company. Under Section B, you will find our investment portfolios. The total is more than you will ever need. There is also a copy of my will. I have structured it very carefully. Chloe is my daughter, and I love her, but she will not inherit a single dollar of our estate as long as she is married to Donald. If they remain married when you pass away, the entire estate will go into a trust for Lucy with your sister Clara as the trustee. Donald will never touch a penny of it. Please call Julian Mercer immediately. He knows everything and is waiting for your call. I love you, Walter. Stay strong. Yours forever, Eleanor. I sat in the quiet study reading my wife's words. I looked down at the documents in the box. I pulled out the first folder under Section A. It was a deed for a 3-bedroom house on Oak Avenue, purchased in 2005. The next was a duplex on Pine Street, purchased in 2008. By the time I finished counting, I was holding 17 property deeds, all registered under my name, Walter Aldridge. I opened the folder under Section B. It was a recent statement from Hartford Securities. The account holder was Walter Aldridge. The balance at the bottom of the page read $4,247,891 once. I opened another statement from Riverside First National Bank. The checking account balance was $87,392. The savings account balance was $1,200,000. I grabbed a notepad and a pen. Using the skills I had honed over 35 years as a bookkeeper, I began to add up the numbers. When I reached the final sum, I stared at the page in silence. My total net worth, not including the house I lived in, was approximately $12.8 million. I couldn't help but smile. Donald and Chloe had just sent me a message cutting me off, believing I was a penniless old man who was a financial drain on them. They had no idea that the house they lived in, the car Donald drove, and their entire lifestyle were funded by a man who was quietly worth nearly $13 million. I picked up the phone and dialed the number for Julian Mercer, our family attorney. He answered on the second ring. "Walter," Julian said, his voice warm and steady. "I was hoping you'd call. I heard about the text message Chloe sent you this morning. Clara called me." I took a deep breath. "Julian, I need your help. It's time to open the box." Julian paused for a moment. "I've been waiting for this day, Walter. Let's get to work." On Monday morning, I drove downtown to the office of Mitchell and Mercer. The city was quiet after the Christmas weekend. I parked my old station wagon next to a line of shiny new luxury cars and walked into the marble-floored lobby. I rode the elevator to the 12th floor. The receptionist smiled and led me straight to a large conference room with windows overlooking the entire valley. Julian Mercer was standing by the window, holding a folder. He was 62 years old, with neat gray hair and a calm, sharp face. "He had been a close friend of my late wife Eleanor for 30 years, Walter," Julian said, shaking my hand warmly. "I am so glad you are finally here. I only wish Eleanor could be here to see this." I sat at the mahogany table and placed my black metal box between us. I read Eleanor's letter, Julian. I saw the deeds and the account balances. But I still can't quite believe it. Julian sat across from me and opened his folder. "Eleanor came to see me 3 years ago, Walter. She had just found out about Donald's debts. He had convinced Chloe to co-sign a massive loan for his sales business, and they were about to lose their house. Eleanor wanted to save their home for Lucy's sake, but she also saw that Donald was greedy. She knew that if we just gave them money, Donald would spend it all and eventually discard you. So we structured everything to protect you." Julian pulled out a deed and slid it across the table. "First, let's talk about the house they live in at 1420 Ridgecrest Drive. You and Eleanor paid the entire down payment, and you co-signed the mortgage. But what Donald and Chloe do not know is that the property deed is registered solely under your name. Under California Civil Code Section 789, they do not own that house. They are technically tenants at will. They live there because you permit them to and because you have been paying the monthly mortgage of $4,500. I looked at the deed. My name, Walter Aldridge, was the only one listed as the owner. And the car? I asked. The luxury SUV Donald drives is also registered in your name, Julian said. You co-signed the loan, but the title is in your name because your credit was used to secure it. You have been making the $1, 200 monthly payments from your personal account. Now that you have canceled the automatic payments, the bank will notify them immediately. Julian pulled out another document. This is the will Eleanor left. As I wrote in the will, Chloe will only inherit your estate if she is no longer married to Donald at the time of your passing. If they are still married, the entire estate, including all 17 properties and the investment accounts, will go into a trust for Lucy. Your sister Clara will be the trustee. Donald will never have access to a single penny of your family's wealth. I leaned back in my chair. Eleanor really did think of everything. She loved you, Walter, and she knew you would be too kind to protect yourself until you were forced to. Julian said with a small smile. So what is our next step? I want to see the properties, I said. I want to understand what I own. Julian gave me the address of Aldridge Property Management LLC. I drove across town to a neat office building and a quiet commercial strip. I walked inside and was met by Linda Davis, a woman in her late 40s who had been managing the rentals for 15 years. Her face lit up when I introduced myself. Mrs. Aldridge was a wonderful woman. Mr. Aldridge, Linda said, bringing me into her office. She always insisted we keep the properties in perfect condition. We have 17 houses and duplexes in our portfolio. They are all occupied by long-term tenants who pay their rent on time. Linda opened a thick binder with 17 tabs. She showed me the photos, the lease agreements, and the financial records for each property. A 3-bedroom house on Oak Avenue rented for $2,800 a month. A bungalow on Pine Street rented for $2,200 a month. Our total monthly rental income is $47,300, Linda explained. After we deduct property taxes, insurance, and our management fees, the net monthly income deposited into your bank account is exactly $43,000. That is $516,000 a year in passive income. I thanked Linda, took copies of all the records, and drove to the Riverside First National Bank. The branch manager, Mr. Peterson, had known me for 30 years. He was shocked when I asked to see the balance of all accounts under the name of Walter Aldridge. He printed out a stack of statements that was nearly 3 inches thick. I sat in my car in the bank parking lot and went through the numbers. My checking account had $87,392. My savings account had $1,200,000. My money market account had $1,500,000. And my investment portfolio at Hartford Securities was valued at $4,247,891. Combined with the 17 properties valued at $5,800,000, my actual net worth was $12.8 million. While I was staring at the statements, my phone buzzed. I turned it on, and a flood of messages popped up. There were 5 missed calls from Chloe and 12 from Donald. Then, a text message from Donald arrived. It was angry and full of capital letters. Walter, what did you do? The bank just notified us that our mortgage payment of $4,500 and the car payment of $1,200 failed because your account canceled the transfer. This is a mortgage. We could lose our house. Call me back immediately. I did not call him back. Instead, I drove to the local diner where my sister Clara was waiting for me. Clara was 68 years old, 3 years younger than me, and she had always been the fiery one in our family. She had never liked Donald from the day Chloe brought him home. When I sat down and told Clara everything, she nearly knocked over her coffee cup. $12 million. Clara gasped, her eyes wide. Walter, you are a multimillionaire, and you've been living on canned soup and driving a station wagon with a rusted door. Eleanor wanted to keep it quiet, Clara, I said. And so did I. And what about Donald and Chloe? Clara asked, her voice dropping. What are you going to do about that text message? I showed her Donald's text. Clara read it, and a huge grin spread across her face. Oh, this is beautiful, she whispered. They thought they were dumping a poor old man, and instead, they just cut off the hand that was feeding them. What are you going to do next? I'm going to let them stew for a few days, I said. Julian Mercer is preparing the legal documents. We are going to build an airtight case. Over the next 3 days, my phone did not stop buzzing. Donald left 4 voicemails, each one more desperate and angry than the last. By Monday evening, the bank had sent them an official notice of late payment. Because Donald had spent all his savings on expensive dinners and club memberships, he did not have the cash to cover the $4,500 mortgage or the fee $200 car loan. Without my automatic transfers, they were facing immediate financial disaster. In his third voicemail, Donald's voice was shaking. "Walter, you need to stop this childish game," he said. "We are family. You can't just cut us off because of a text message. If you don't reinstate the payments by Wednesday, we will make sure you never set foot in our house again. You won't see Lucy for her school play. You won't see her for New Year's. You are going to be completely cut off from this family. Think about what you're doing." I saved that voicemail and emailed the audio file to Julian Mercer. Under California law, a voluntary voicemail is fully admissible as evidence. On Wednesday morning, December 28th, my sister Clara was at my house helping me prune the rose bushes in the front yard. Suddenly, Donald's luxury SUV pulled into my driveway. The tires screeched slightly as he parked. Donald got out, slammed shutting his door. Chloe followed him, looking pale and nervous, holding her designer handbag like a shield. "Walter," Donald yelled as he walked up the driveway, "we need to talk, now." I stood up, holding my gardening shears, and wiped my hands on my jeans. "Good morning, Donald." "Hello, Chloe." Chloe looked at the ground, unable to meet my eyes. Clara stood right next to me, her arms crossed, glaring at Donald. "Don't you start shouting on my brother's property. Donald!" Clara warned. Donald ignored her and pointed a finger at me. "Walter, you canceled the payments. The bank is charging us late fees, and the car dealership called me about repossessing the SUV. What is wrong with you? We sent you that text on Christmas because we need space. You are constantly trying to insert yourself into our lives, but that doesn't mean you can just ruin us financially." I looked at him calmly. "Donald, you sent me a message saying you wanted to distance yourselves from me. You told me not to look for you anymore. I simply complied. If you don't want me in your lives, it makes no sense for my money to be in your bank accounts." Donald's face flushed deep red. "That is different. That money is for Lucy's stability. You are her grandfather. You have a duty to support us." "I don't have a duty to pay for your luxury SUV, Donald," I said quietly. "And I don't have a duty to pay a mortgage on a house where I am not welcome." Donald stepped closer, his voice dropping into a harsh, threatening tone. "Listen to me, old man. You are going to sign a document transferring the mortgage and the SUV loan entirely into your name as the sole payer, or you will never see Lucy again. I mean it. We will file a restraining order. We will tell the court you are senile and harassing us. You will die alone in this house without ever seeing your granddaughter again." "Chloe, tell him." Chloe looked up, her lips trembling. "Dad, please," she said, her voice small. "Just sign the papers. Donald is right, we need the stability. If you don't, we can't let you see Lucy. It's too stressful for her." I felt a sharp pain in my chest. My own daughter was standing there, agreeing to extort me using my granddaughter as bait. But I kept my face blank, so I said, "Let me make sure I understand. If I do not pay your debts, you will block me from seeing my granddaughter? And you are threatening to call me senile to get what you want." Donald smirked, thinking he had won. "Exactly. You have no choice, Walter. You're just a retired clerk with a tiny pension. You need us. Sign the papers by Friday, or you're dead to us." They turned and walked back to their car. Donald peeled out of the driveway, leaving black tire marks on the street. Clara was shaking with anger. "That disgusting, greedy piece of garbage," she spat. "Walter, tell me you recorded that." I pulled my phone out of my front pocket. The screen was black, but the voice memo app had been running the entire time. I stopped the recording and played it back. The audio was crystal clear. "We have them, Walter," Clara said, her eyes shining. "We have them completely." I called Julian Mercer immediately and sent him the recording of the driveway confrontation. Within an hour, Julian called me back. His voice was filled with professional satisfaction. "Walter, this is a clear-cut case of elder financial abuse under California Welfare and Institutions. Code Section 1561030, Julian said. Donald is attempting to use emotional coercion and threats of isolation to force you to sign over financial assets. And Chloe's participation makes her liable as well. We have more than enough to file civil charges and obtain an immediate protection order. I don't want to file charges yet, Julian, I said. I want them to face the truth first. I want them to realize exactly what they have thrown away. What are you planning? Julian asked. I am hosting a New Year's Eve dinner at my house on December 31st, I said. I am sending out formal invitations today. I want you to attend, Julian, and I want you to bring the complete financial binders and the deeds. Julian chuckled. A New Year's Eve surprise. I wouldn't miss it for the world, Walter. That afternoon, I wrote out the invitations on formal cream-colored cardstock. I sent them to Donald and Chloe, Clara, my late wife's brother Richard and his wife Susan, and our neighbors, the Caldwells. I wrote on the card, formal dinner at 6 p.m. to discuss the future of the Aldridge family assets. RSVP by Friday. I knew Donald would not be able to resist. He would think I was finally backing down and preparing to sign the papers. On New Year's Eve, my dining room was set for 9 people. The table was covered with Eleanor's best white tablecloth, and the silver candlesticks cast a warm glow across the room. I had cooked all day preparing a prime rib roast, rosemary potatoes, and Eleanor's signature pecan pie. I was wearing a tailored navy suit that I hadn't worn since our 40th anniversary party. Clara arrived at 5:30, followed by my brother-in-law Richard and his wife Susan. The Caldwells, our neighbors who had been close friends of ours for 15 years, arrived next. Everyone was dressed formally, and everyone had a quiet sense of anticipation. They all knew about the text message, the driveway confrontation, and the plan at 5:55. Donald's luxury SUV pulled into the driveway. Donald got out wearing a sharp, expensive suit. He had a smug look on his face. Chloe walked beside him, wearing a designer dress and a large diamond necklace that she had bought last year with my money. She looked tense but tried to smile as they walked in. Walter, Donald said, shaking my hand with an air of victory. Happy New Year. I see you decided to host a proper family dinner after all. I hope you have the papers ready. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, Donald, I said calmly. Let's enjoy our dinner first. The papers can wait for dessert. The dinner was quiet. Donald was in high spirits, talking loudly about his sales business and his plans to upgrade their backyard pool. He acted as if he already owned the place, and he treated the other guests with a condescending politeness. Chloe barely spoke, taking small bites of her food and looking at the empty chair at the end of the table. "Who is that seat for, Dad?" Chloe asked. "A family friend," I replied. "He will be joining us shortly at 7 Ling." The doorbell rang. I stood up, cleared my plate, and opened the door. Julian Mercer walked in carrying a large leather briefcase. He had a stack of bound documents in his hands. "Merry New Year, Walter," Julian said. "Let's begin." I led Julian into the dining room. Donald's face froze when he saw him. "Julian Mercer?" Donald said, his voice tightening. "What is an estate lawyer doing here?" Julian sat in the empty chair at the end of the table and opened his briefcase. "Good evening, everyone. I am here to facilitate a discussion about the Aldridge family assets." Donald stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "Walter, this is a family matter. We don't need a lawyer to sign a mortgage transfer. What is this?" "Sit down, Donald," Clara said, her voice sharp. "Let the man speak." Donald glared at her but slowly sat down. "Let's start with the house on Ridgecrest Drive," Julian Mercer said, pulling out a copy of the deed. "Donald, you and Chloe have been living in this house for 3 years. You believed that because you lived there, you were the owners, and that Walter co-signed the mortgage purely to help you." "Well, yes," Donald said, crossing his arms. "It is our house. Walter is just the co-signer." "Actually," Julian said, sliding the deed across the table to Donald. "This is the deed to 1420 Ridgecrest Drive. You will see that the sole owner of the property is Walter Aldridge. The down payment was paid entirely from a trust account set up by Walter and Eleanor, and Walter is the primary mortgagor. You and Chloe do not own the property. You have no legal title. You are tenants at will. Under California Civil Code Section 789, Walter has the right to terminate your tenancy with a 30-day notice." Donald's face went from smug to pale in an instant. He grabbed the deed and stared at it. "That is impossible. We co-signed." "You signed as occupants, not owners," Julian explained calmly. Your credit was not sufficient to secure the mortgage. The bank required Walter to be the sole owner to approve the loan. Donald turned to Chloe. Did you know about this? Chloe shook her head, tears filling her eyes. No, I thought it was our house. And that is not all, Julian continued. Let's talk about the will of Eleanor Aldridge. As the drafter of that will, I can confirm that her estate was structured very specifically. Chloe, you are Eleanor's only daughter, but under the terms of the will, you will only inherit any portion of the estate if you are no longer married to Donald Vance at the time of your father's passing. If you are still married to him, the entire inheritance passes into a trust for Lucy. Donald will never have any access to the Aldridge family assets. This is illegal, Donald shouted, his face turning red. You can't write a will like that. Under the California Probate Code, it is entirely legal to place conditional clauses on non-marital assets, Julian replied. Eleanor wanted to ensure her family's wealth remained in the family, not with someone who was actively running up massive debts. Donald turned to me, his fists clenched. You old fool. You think you're clever. You're still just a penniless retired clerk. If you evict us, you lose your granddaughter. We will block you from ever seeing Lucy again. You have nothing but this old house and your pension. I looked at him, then nodded to Julian. Julian Mercer pulled out a thick bound folder and placed it in the center of the table. Actually, Donald, Julian said, this is the financial statement of Walter Aldridge, certified by Jang & Associates CPA as of December 23rd. Let me read the summary. Walter's checking, savings, and money market accounts hold a combined $2,787,392. His investment portfolio with Hartford Securities is valued at $4,247,891. And his real estate portfolio consists of 17 rental properties, generating a net passive income of $43,000 per month, valued at $5.8 million. Julian looked up at Donald. Walter's total net worth is $12.8 million. He is not a penniless retired clerk. He is one of the wealthiest private individuals in the county. The dining room fell into an absolute suffocating silence. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Donald stared at the bound folder like it was a bomb. Chloe gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. $12 million. Chloe whispered, looking at me. Dad, I stood up, placing my hands flat on the table. Yes, Chloe, I said. Your mother and I spent 30 years building this. We lived modestly because we didn't care about showing off. We wanted to ensure our family was secure. And we used that security to support you. We paid your mortgage. We paid for Donald's luxury car. And in return, Donald decided I was an embarrassment. He convinced you that I was a burden, and you sent me a message telling me to stay away from you. I pulled out my phone and pressed play on a voice recording. Donald's voice filled the room. You are going to sign a document transferring the mortgage and the SUV loan, or you will never see Lucy again. We will tell the court you are senile. You will die alone in this house without ever seeing your granddaughter again. I stopped the playback. This is elder financial abuse, Donald, I said. And in the state of California, it carries severe civil and criminal penalties. We have the recordings, we have the voicemails, and we have Clara as a witness to your threats. On Monday morning, Julian is prepared to file elder abuse charges and an immediate protection order. Donald stood frozen, his eyes darting from the documents to the phone in my hand, and then to Julian Mercer. He tried to speak, but only a dry, choking sound came out of his throat. The arrogance that had defined him for 5 years seemed to drain out of him, leaving him looking small and defeated. He knew he had no cards left to play. He had no money, his credit was ruined, and he was facing a team of lawyers backed by a $12.8 million estate. Chloe was sobbing, her head in her hands. The diamond necklace she wore seemed to weigh her down. Suddenly she looked up, her face wet with tears, and turned to Donald. How could you do this? Chloe cried. You told me my father was draining our resources. You told me he was using his pension to control us. You lied to me, Donald stammered, looking at the floor. Chloe, I was just trying to protect our future. The business was struggling and protect our future? Chloe stood up, her voice rising. You tried to steal my father's house. You made me send that text message on Christmas morning. You made me tell my own father he couldn't see Lucy. Chloe turned to me, her lips trembling. Dad, I am so sorry. I was so blind. I let him control everything. I let him convince me that you were a burden because I was terrified of losing our home. Please, Dad, please forgive me. I looked at my daughter. My heart was heavy, but my mind was clear. I had spent weeks preparing for this moment, not to destroy my daughter, but to save her from the man who was dragging her down. I am not going to file charges on Monday morning, Chloe, I said quietly. But the way we do things is going to change tonight. Donald looked up, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. First, I said, looking directly at Donald, you will apologize to my sister Clara, to Richard, to Susan, and to the Caldwells for the way you have treated us. You will apologize for your behavior at Thanksgiving and today. Donald swallowed hard, looked around the table at the faces of my family and neighbors, and mumbled, I'm sorry. I was wrong. Second, I continued, you will sign a formal lease agreement prepared by Julian. You will pay a market rent of $3, $500 a month for the house on Ridgecrest Drive. The rent will be paid directly to Aldridge Property Management. If you miss a single payment, you will be served an eviction notice the next day. No exceptions. Donald nodded quickly. Yes, I understand. Third, you will take over the car loan for the SUV. I am removing my name from the account. If you cannot afford the $2,200 monthly payment, the dealership will repossess the car. It is no longer my concern. And fourth, I said, my voice hardening, you will never, under any circumstances, try to limit my time with Lucy. If I find out that you have spoken a single negative word about me to my granddaughter, or if you try to block me from seeing her, Julian will file the elder abuse charges immediately. Do you understand? Donald nodded again, his face pale. I understand, Walter. I'm sorry. I sat back down in my chair. Now I think it is time for you both to leave. Clara, Richard, and the Caldwells are staying for dessert. But Donald, Chloe, you need to go home. They stood up. Donald looked like a ghost as he walked toward the door. Chloe paused, looking at me with a mixture of shame and gratitude. Thank you, Dad, she whispered. I nodded. We will talk next week, Chloe. But tonight, go home. They left, and the front door clicked shut. The silence in the house was finally peaceful. Clara let out a loud breath and reached for the pecan pie. Well, she said, that was the best New Year's Eve dinner I have ever attended. Pass me a slice of pie, Walter. 6 months later, I woke up on a warm morning in June. The sun was streaming through my kitchen window, lighting up the garden. I made my coffee and walked out to the backyard. The roses Eleanor had planted were in full bloom, their red petals bright against the green leaves. The garden was thriving and the air was sweet. My house, 847 Maple Street. It was quiet, peaceful, and entirely mine. My life had changed, but not in the way Donald and Chloe had expected. I was still Walter, the retired bookkeeper who drove an old station wagon and wore flannel shirts. My neighbors still saw me as the quiet old man who volunteered at the library and worked in his garden. They didn't know about the $12.8 million. No one did, except my sister Clara and Julian Mercer. And that was exactly how I wanted it. But my relationship with my family had changed. Chloe and Donald were currently in marriage counseling. Donald's arrogance was entirely gone. He was working 12 hours a day to cover the $3,500 rent and the car payments. He had learned that his lifestyle was not a right, but something he had to earn. He treated me with absolute respect now, always calling me Mr. Aldridge and opening the door for me when I visited. Chloe had started working part-time at a local boutique. She was rebuilding her independence. She called me twice a week, not to ask for money, but just to chat, to ask how my garden was doing, and to invite me over. And Lucy, my sweet granddaughter, spent every weekend at my house. We worked in the garden together, planting seeds and watering the tomatoes. She would run to me and hug my knees whenever she saw my station wagon pull into their driveway. As I sat on my porch, sipping my coffee and watching a blue jay land on the bird feeder, I felt a deep sense of peace. I could feel Eleanor in every corner of this house, in the rustle of the rose leaves, and in the quiet security she had built for me. At 65 years old, I had learned the most important lesson of all. Being underestimated is not a weakness. It is a strategic advantage. When you stay calm, gather your facts, and wait for the right moment, you don't need to yell to be heard. The truth, backed by careful preparation, will always speak for itself. I raised my coffee cup to the empty chair beside me, where Eleanor used to sit. "Thank you, my love," I whispered. "We did it." A gentle breeze blew through the yard, and somewhere in my heart I knew she was smiling.